Hello, everyone, and welcome to Biohackers Lab. I'm your host, Gary Cohen, and on today's episode, I have Niraj Naik. Niraj is a qualified pharmacist who started work as a community pharmacist in the UK. This is where he first got to see people getting bags of drugs every month, but rarely getting better. He was then promoted to the head office of one of the largest supermarket chains in the UK. This was when he first got branded the Renegade Pharmacist, due to the corporate management seeing his idea of a healthy shopping list was too risky for the business. Raj, thanks so much for coming on for an episode for today.
Hey, my pleasure.
Yeah. So we were talking about being a pharmacist there, but what's interesting is you've learned how to tap into your internal pharmacy. So not relying on drugs. And that's actually what we're going to be discussing today and how you've managed to do that.
Yes.
And so
Pleasure.
for listeners who don't know, you do a lot to do with breathwork training and breathing, and that's what we're going to be focusing on today. So to introduce people to this concept, what is the difference between normal breathing and breathwork training?
Yeah, sure. So what is breathwork training? Well, actually, there's many different styles of breathwork. Okay, it can actually be a little bit confusing. If you even type into Google breathwork, the keyword breathwork, you'll see that I have an article, one of the top articles, where I go through all of the various styles, the science behind it, and as I trained in various different styles, actually, I did a lot with Wim Hof. He's a friend of mine. I did a lot of stuff with holotropic before that, and Pranayama, which is what I use, which is the ancient school of breathing techniques from India, which I used to heal myself from a chronic illness. So just going back to your introduction, what happened was I became very successful at getting people off medications, primarily by giving them a prescription of dietary changes, lifestyle changes, and pranayama techniques, breathing techniques, and meditation techniques that help them get off the dependency of drugs. So I actually then became a patient, funny enough. I got super sick when I went through a lot of the corporate stress, trying to get my renegade ideas out there to the public. And I ended up literally housebound for a year with autoimmune condition called ulcerative colitis. It was almost like the heavens or hell, whichever way you want to look at it, was giving me a kind of a test to go inwards, because I've been very good at helping other people. I wasn't taken very seriously, to be honest. Like, I was too renegade. I was way ahead of my time. Like, it's only now in recent times in the UK I've started to understand things like diet, nutrition, and wellness. But when I was, this was like 2010 sort of time, things I was saying like sugar is what causes heart disease, not necessarily the fat. All these sorts of things. Don't eat processed foods, don't eat junk foods, even though they're called junk foods. It was still quite controversial back then, especially for a big supermarket chain that is, in the public eye. So I had a lot of challenges, and one of the things that really I had to kind of figure out in my own mind was when my Swami, who actually taught me the basic foundations of pranayama, told me that the opposite of what we think in the convention is true. So we all believe that oxygen is the thing that we need to thrive, to survive, and that we have almost, it's like there's a lot of, even now in the media and just the awareness is that we're in this deficit of oxygen, and that we need to breathe deeply and get all this oxygen into our lungs. Actually, what my Swami was telling me was, it's not the truth. That according to pranayama, we should be breathing less. The more efficient we can be at using oxygen, the less stress we actually invoke in the body. Okay. And I'll talk to you a little bit about the science of that and why that makes sense, and contradicts what we've been told. So in pranayama, which basically means energy control, it's a whole series of breathing techniques, and it tells you the normal way to breathe as well versus the 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 way most people breathe. And according to pranayama, we must always breathe through the nose. Okay, the nose is like a filter for dust, bacteria, germs in the air. We have all these little hairs, okay, in the nose, and that filters the air and also warms it. So only warm, clean air goes into your lungs. Okay. Now, in the convention, actually, we're not really told should we breathe through the nose or the mouth. And a lot of people you'll notice breathe through the mouth. They're mouth breathers and they have these blocked up noses. And quite often people are reaching for decongestants and things to unblock their nose so they can breathe again. However, the problem with that is that they trigger even more congestion and they get even more problems with congestion in the nose because people overuse things like decongestants. Okay. Again, actually, if you type into Google unblock nose in minutes or just unblock nose, you'll see I've got a whole article and video that shows you in minutes how just using breathing techniques you can unblock your nose and breathe very clearly. I've helped so many people with these things, and so that they don't have to take decongestants. But that's another story in itself. But basically, just to give you like a bit of a background to how the physiology works, relationship to the breath. When you breathe in, you breathe in oxygen. Okay, when you breathe out carbon dioxide. Oxygen goes into the bloodstream. Okay, it binds to red blood cells. Okay, now what we need to get that oxygen off the red blood cells and into the cells where they're needed, in the tissues and the organs. All right. Now, if you actually have too much oxygen, okay, right, the oxygen stays bound to the red blood cells and it doesn't diffuse off into the cells where it's needed. So what you have to do is you have to raise the carbon dioxide to the right level for the oxygen to be able to go in to the tissue cells, okay? So you have to have the right concentration of carbon dioxide. If you're over breathing, if you're breathing a lot, you're tending to breathe out all the carbon dioxide and retain oxygen. And that over breathing is triggered by stress, okay? So our emotional stress responses actually can trigger internally a demand for oxygen that isn't actually needed, because our emotional stress responses stimulates the same responses physiologically as physical stress does. So here's how that works. So in the olden days, when we were in the jungles, okay, living like in tribes and small tribes, we were surrounded by lions, tigers, bears, and other tribes and people who we had to defend ourselves from, okay? So this sympathetic nervous system, which actually triggers this demand for energy and oxygen, the flight or fight response, which everyone's very familiar with, okay, served us very well because it allowed us to kick into gear and to either run away or to defend ourselves. However, fast forward to this time, those jungles are now replaced by concrete jungles. However, I do nowadays live in the jungles of Thailand, but they're now replaced by, for most people, and for me as well, when I was working in the corporate head office, concrete jungles. And instead of lions and tigers and bears, you have bosses, deadlines, bills, relationships that aren't working, and all the things that cause emotional stress that makes us worry about the future, or what makes us feel guilty about things we've done in the past, or jealous or envy, all those negative emotions, okay? Those negative emotions, because if you think of emotion as an equation of energy in motion, okay, then all of these emotions we feel internally as an energetic response too. So negative emotions triggers negative stress response, which actually produces a bigger demand on our body for oxygen, okay, when we don't really need it because we're not physically doing anything. We're sitting there freaking out, stressed about the bills that we haven't paid, or this boss is bullying us. And every time that word hits us, they say sticks and stones won't break my bones, words will never harm me. Well, that's not true. The words are always there internally doing something to us. whether we like it or not, unless we become very resilient to what people say. And unfortunately, we live in a world where we're very much conscious about what people say. As people getting trolled these days, there's a lot of stress, negativity, even just the news. Turn on the news for 2 minutes and you're bombarded by negative information. So what that does is it makes us demand more oxygen when we don't really need it. We start to over breathe. And this is where we start to now start mouth breathing rather than nose breathing. And what happens is, because our breath is under control of both the reptilian brain, okay, the primitive brain, but also our conscious brain, the neocortex, we can actually consciously control our autonomic nervous system, actually just through our breath. However, the autonomic nervous system, if left to its own devices, the reptilian brain, the lizard, if it's left to its own devices, if we don't consciously just take control over it for a bit, what will happen is it will overbreathe, it will breathe erratically, okay? And here's the other thing, when you breathe out of rhythm, out of sync, that again affects our heart, okay? Because our breath is related, and the pattern of our breath is related to our rhythm of the heart. Okay, when you breathe in, you stimulate the sympathetic nervous system, your heart rate goes up a bit. When you breathe out, your heart rate goes down a bit, okay? So when you breathe in a rhythm, you actually maintain a nice balance, a harmonic balance in your heart rhythms. However, if you breathe erratically, this also disrupts the heart. Therefore, getting back to the question, what's normal breathing? Okay, well, normal breathing is rhythmic breathing, breathing through the nose and trying to breathe into the belly, okay, as much as possible rather than the chest. When you breathe into the belly, okay, what happens is you stimulate parasympathetic nervous receptors and you bypass the sympathetic. When you breathe from the chest or through the mouth, you stimulate more the stress response. That's really reserved for physical exercise, okay? And when you're talking, like talking right now, I'm actually breathing a lot through my mouth, and if I measured my heart rate, it's probably going up, okay? I'm stimulating more energy, all right? However, when you breathe through the belly and you do rhythmic breathing, okay, and you could use music, okay, with a beat to it, and breathe in a rhythm to that beat, okay, that's really the natural, coherent way to breathe, that we should breathe. And most people who are very relaxed and in their flow, in their element, they tend to breathe in a nice rhythmic fashion. People who are stressed, nervous, they tend to breathe through the mouth, and they even may be quite nasally. You'll find people who are a little bit nervous and anxious tend to also be a little bit nasally. The nose tends to be a bit blocked because the nose is very intelligent as well. So what happens is, if you overbreathe, your nose will compensate if you're breathing a lot through your mouth by blocking it, producing mucus to slow down the rate of air going in, okay? Now, here's the thing. The yogis knew all about this stuff. The ancient yogis, okay? They knew all about this, and they created a system called pranayama, which is energy control, because they know that the breath is spirit. Actually, the root word of the word spiritual in Latin is to breathe. Spirit, espiritu means breath. So to breathe is spirituality. Okay? To be, everyone is spiritual because we all breathe. All right, that's the thing that keeps us all connected. We're all connected through the fact that we all breathe. And actually, if you stand by someone, you eventually, and you spend some time just in the presence of someone, you'll eventually start to match their breathing. Or you can actually breathe in a rhythm, and it will rub off on other people around you, and they'll get more into a coherent rhythm just through you breathing in rhythm. So it's weird, like the breath is like our way of connecting to people as well. Anyway, so pranayama is this basically a prescription, different breathing techniques, okay? And the primary foundation of this is the knowledge, the awareness that oxygen, too much oxygen is like too much fire in the body. Okay, let's go back into the cells. The mitochondria is where oxygen is utilized to produce energy, ATP energy. Oxygen binds with glucose. Okay, glucose is sugar. Okay, fuel, it's just like coal on the fire. Oxygen binds with that, creates fire, an inner fire. Okay, that fire is the energy, the ATP energy, which is the currency of energy in the body. Right. So basically, just like a real fire, too much oxygen makes the fire burn too bright. And that fire can cause oxidative stress, free radical damage, oxidative reactive species. So that has this like rusting effect in the body, and also cause cell degeneration and the slowing down of the shortening of telomerase. Okay, so basically, when you have too little oxygen, the fire doesn't burn at all bright enough, so you don't have enough energy. So we have to get the right balance of oxygen in the body, and that's what pranayama is really about. Okay, so the more efficient you can be at using oxygen, the less oxygen you'll need. Okay, and the less oxygen you'll need means you'll have less risk of damage in your cells. Your telomeres will stay long, and you will be less risk of mutations of the cells, less risk of cancer and aging, other autoimmune diseases, and you'll look younger and you'll be healthier. That's the theory. And if you go to India and you go to the Himalayas, you'll find these yogis who live very long periods of time. Why again? Up in the Himalayas, the oxygen levels are very low, and people live in a much more carbon dioxide rich environment versus oxygen, and they're very efficient using oxygen because the body's adapted. Look at the Nepalese Gurkha army, strongest army in the world. You know, they're employed by the Americans and the British to win their fights. They live in high altitude. They live in the Nepalese mountains, and you know they're super fit, very robust. They don't get diseases as often as other people. So the Russians also did a lot of studies on this, and they noticed people who go up to high altitudes, okay, and come back, they report feeling better, healthier, some reversal of their symptoms, and athletes in general get fitter and have more endurance and stamina. So they wanted to figure out what was going on, and they created these hypoxicator machines where you'd get like a period of low oxygen and normal oxygen over a period of like 30 to 45 minutes, and they were getting remarkable results. However, the yogis, the pranayama yogis, they basically knew that just through breathing, holding your breath, okay, breath retention in a certain way, so rhythmic breathing followed by breath retention, you would also create the same effects. They simulate high altitude. Now, this is where we start getting into the realms of conscious control over the breath. Okay, so this is now in the realms of breath work. Okay, whereas normal breathing is just a relaxed rhythmic breathing. But breath work is where you start to consciously modulate the breath in order to create physiological change in the body, because ultimately, the thing that really affects our body the most is this oxygen carbon dioxide ratio. You can do so many weird things with the body physiologically just by modulating the oxygen carbon dioxide ratio. Yogis knew this, and pranayama became the school of that, which a lot of things came from, like Chinese medicine and all of these, like qigong, all really had a root in pranayama. And then now we have more modern forms of breathwork. So we have holotropic, we have rebirthing. Now these are kind of like where people have taken one of the pranayama techniques and blown it up into this whole thing. Now the danger of this is that if you don't know the physiological changes that are occurring scientifically, and you're using that as the normal breathing, as the standard for breathing, like basically rebirthing and holotropic is like hyperventilating. Okay, Wim Hof is another one that's become very popular. He's a friend of mine. But a lot of people, they use that as the standard for breathing, when actually it's just the technique for that purpose. You're not meant to make that your normal way of breathing, which is this mouth breathing, fast mouth breathing. Okay, so this is what people need to be aware of, is that normal breathing versus breathwork breathing techniques are there, and they have a deep effect on the physiology of the body. Therefore, they need to be treated almost like drugs, like with that much respect.
Yeah. So, I mean, I'm loving this concept because, as you said, back in 2010, when you were introducing the idea of, hey, maybe we should cut down on our sugar intake, it's not harmful to take saturated fat. This, to me, with this breathing, is kind of like that concept to say, hey, do you actually need that much oxygen all the time? Like, but the one thing that also gets me really thinking here is because so we're talking about therapeutic ways, which is why I'm loving this, and we'll get into that in a little bit more. But I'm trying to think of the difference of the application when you would use what we're talking about here, intermittent hypoxia, which is cutting down the amount of oxygen you got, versus something like hyperbaric chamber treatment, where you actually get a lot of oxygen forced into you.
Yes.
How do you see the difference there in the benefits or the risks that are involved between those two?
Hyperbaric oxygen chambers have no evidence at all for any health benefits other than the fact that they can sometimes speed up the healing of wounds on the skin diseases and things. Because a lot of the bacteria that cause skin lesions and ulcers on the skin are anaerobic. Okay, they may be anaerobic. Therefore, like hitting them with oxygen can actually kill them faster, better than antibiotics, because oxygen loves to kill things. Okay, if it can, it likes to react with things and oxidate them. So so certain bacteria hate oxygen. Okay, obviously our skin can handle it. Our skin doesn't get burned by oxygen so much, but internally, who knows what's going on, having so much oxygen. I've been in one of these chambers and I remember feeling anxious and panicky at one point in it. And it was like towards the end and I was just, it was weird. But I was doing a few like rhythmic breathing things as well and messing around with my breath in there. But I definitely felt like, I didn't feel like great afterwards, like I do if I do the opposite, where I hold my breath and do like hypoxic training. Like I didn't feel that like real relaxed buzz from it. And yeah, if you just do the science, you'll see there's not much evidence for their health benefits other than the fact that they can help speed up wound healing.
Yeah. So when I was trying to do a bit of research around hypoxia, so trying to limit your oxygen intake, which is again the polar opposite, I found it fascinating to see that researchers have been looking at this even in spinal cord injury patients. I don't know if you've come across that, but I was just looking because they have a problem if when they damage the spinal cord that they struggle to breathe at times, and then they develop pneumonia. Paraplegics can get this, and they're actually finding that if you limit someone's oxygen intake in a controlled fashion for a short period of time, it can actually stimulate serotonin running down the spinal cord, and there's a whole bunch of other aspects to this. And again, to me, this is a whole new realm of worlds thinking. I must try limit my breathing at times as normal breathing, not actually try get, it's in a way it would be like trying to take an oxygen chamber and put that around if I had difficulty breathing, and that's not optimal. I'd actually want to live in a place where I could breathe, and as you said, limit the rate that I'm breathing, or so that I'm not breathing in too deep. And that leads into something that's probably more common with people listening right now, which is anxiety and panic attacks. And for anyone who, I know a lot of people who suffer that. I seem to always come across people who seem to get anxious or, worked up about that. What would be a tip that you could give those people right now listening to that who may be on a train somewhere in a subway or in their car and they're feeling a bit anxious?
Okay. Well, yeah, just going back to that oxygen thing. So, doctors have oxygen tanks full of oxygen, 100% oxygen. If they really could cure everything with oxygen, they would be, right? But they can't. So, that oxygen isn't a cure-all, and we don't need to deep breathe and get loads of oxygen. So that's the paradigm shift I'm trying to change. So let's look at panic and anxiety. Right. So it's actually like a vicious cycle. All right. So you get nervous about something, right? It starts making that emotional reaction. So you start to breathe a bit faster. Quite often, anxious people start to breathe and hyperventilate through the mouth. And you gasp. Okay. And what you might be doing is holding on to the air like that and getting this tightness of the chest. Okay. Now let's look at this. I love to actually just paint pictures for people, because if somebody's suffering from anxiety and just from a bit of an awareness of like physiological changes that occur, and having a little bit of biology background, like just even basics, I found was very enlightening for people, especially in the pharmacy, when I just taught them basic things about their biology and food and diet and what it does to you. It made huge shifts in getting people to actually stop eating junk food. Or it's just, we live in a very, very, very kind of like sheltered world. Like people are like kind of really sheltered from the truth, you know, and maybe they don't study properly at school or whatever. Teacher was too boring, but you know, there is certain things that is really worth knowing, you know, about your body, like biology. And basically, one of the things is this idea of where anxiety stems from and where does fear come from. Okay, so one of the things everyone should realize is that right in the core of us is this reptilian. We're like a snake from our brainstem all the way down to the bottom of our spine. We are like a snake. Okay, and just like a snake in nature, that snake's very alert, high alert for danger. All it cares about is survival. So all it cares about is your survival. Okay, now what happens is when you're born, okay, when you're first born, the first thing a baby that does is takes this big gasp of air, and it quite often it holds on to it because it's the first time the baby's now fending for itself. Okay, reptilian brain is alert, very alert, and it's completely now dependent on somebody else's, the environment and your parents, doctor, whatever, other people for survival. Before it was very well nurtured and cared for in the womb. Now suddenly you have to fend for yourself. First thing baby does is gasp for air, because before it's been getting oxygen through the umbilical cord. Now it's like going to breathe for the first time. So doesn't know how to breathe actually. So when you breathe in, like a lot of the times babies will hold their breath, okay, until the doctor slaps them, okay, and then takes his first exhale and starts crying and then gets into a rhythm. And sometimes babies don't get into the rhythm until a little bit of coaching in the beginning. So what I'm saying is that actually our tendency under fear, under stress, is to almost like think like that breath is the last breath you're going to take, and to gasp like that. And quite a lot of people under fear, they get tightness of the chest is holding on to the inhale, okay? And as I said, when you inhale, you stimulate the sympathetic nervous system, okay? If you were to inhale and hold and squeeze your muscles even, your heart rate will go up, especially if you squeeze the sphincter muscles, okay? And there's a saying, you know, people who are uptight, you know, they tend to get high blood pressure and things like that. Well, actually, if you were to just do that, if you were to breathe in and squeeze and pull up your pelvic floor muscles, with the sphincter muscles up, drawing it up, actually your heart rate will go up. Heart rate goes up. It creates a surge of adrenaline, okay? This is one of the ways you can consciously control your autonomic nervous system. But anyway, that's another topic. But a lot of people do that. They breathe in and they're gasping, or they're holding onto the breath. And they're not doing what is probably the most important thing of all, is exhale, okay? One of the most powerful things my Swami taught me, the complete paradigm shift, was that extend your exhale. Extend your exhale. Try and get into a rhythm where you're breathing in for 2 and out for 4, okay? Because that, it keeps you in this more parasympathetic state rather than the sympathetic state that's switched on. So one of the things that can actually straight away stop you feeling anxious is just to extend your exhalation. So if you go like that, even just that can be enough to calm you down, right? If you do this breathing pattern, this is my favorite breathing pattern, in for 4, out for 8. So you're doubling the exhale time. So through the nose and then out So you're just doing cycles of breathing in for 4 and out for 8, or in for 2, out for 4. Okay, what happens is, because when you breathe out, you stimulate the parasympathetic nervous system. Okay, and when you're breathing out, you're giving more time carbon dioxide to build up. You're not breathing it all out very quickly. Okay, it means that you calm down, you relax, the anxiety fades away. Okay, so that's one simple way of relieving anxiety. Another way is just to do OMs, or make that tone. Okay, really good. Those of you who are into doing ice baths and things like that and freezing your ass off. Okay, and what happens when you get in straight away like that? Okay, it's the same thing. It creates panic. Okay, so one way, the real trick is to make the tones. If you look at Siberian shamans, they're all about the throat singing and tones. They're all going, making all these tones. Just do that, all right, for a few minutes. If you're feeling anxious, you'll be totally calm. Okay, if you go into an ice bath, first thing, just do that tone. Ooh, even just doing it, ooh, like that calms you down. When you purse your lips and blow out, like you're playing a flute or clarinet, or simply just singing or whistling, has been shown it stimulates the vagus nerve. Okay, just that pursing the lips and blowing out. So another technique from Pranayama is where you just breathe in, and blow out through a small straw. So you're really slowing down the exhale, okay? Slowing down your breath and rhythm of breath, and you're really slowing it down. That calms the nervous system down. Breathe fast, nervous system goes up. Adrenaline goes up, heart rate goes up. Breathe slow, everything slows down, becomes calm and relaxed. So that's it, basically. That's like a simple kind of overview of.
Yeah, but this is what I love, because the reason I love this topic of breathing today and introducing people is because the whole idea is, how do we live healthy through our life? And breathing is a fundamental thing. And we're trying to learn how to optimize breathing, but optimize breathing for what you need in a different situation. So as you said, you can use your breathing to actually amp your heart rate up if needed to for a certain situation, or you can actually use it to bring it down again if you're getting overexcited. But it just shows we are in control, and we can change our nervous system. We can change the way we feel purely by the way that we can consciously choose to breathe. And I love all these tips that you give them, because I can only imagine so many people listening right now who were just sitting there pursing their lips and trying to blow out. Or and a key thing you said there too was that prolonged exhalation. Just really take your time to breathe out. Don't rush breathing out and try quickly breathe in. That's one of the key things, is actually don't panic. You can breathe out. It's okay. You're in control. And then I also, I know what people are going to be doing, because exactly as you said, so many people do cold showers, cold baths for the cold thermogenesis benefit. And I can hear all these people now having their cold showers in the morning and umming. I heard Niraj on the podcast, and he said, okay, so it's cold shower and I'm struggling here, but he says like, ooh.
And if you hang out with Wim long enough, Wim Hof, he's always doing, he's always doing that.
Yeah.
And that's what the first thing my Swami taught me was to chant Om. He said, start chanting Om. Because when I used to get so stressed and sick from work, coming home tired, I would just and before going to work, stop me from reacting and getting crazy at the patients and stuff, because I was so stressed out with the amount of pills that they had to push. Or just get in there, get centered, and actually it feels good. And what you'll find actually when you do these other breathing techniques, like the intermittent hypoxic training using the breath, you actually become so efficient using oxygen that you will be able to extend your OMS times, and you'll be able to really monitor your health, actually, because the length of time you can hold your breath or you can chant Om is a measure of your vital capacity. It's your ability to use oxygen. So the longer your Om time is, the healthier you are, the more efficient you are, and the less risk you are of getting oxidative stress in the body.
Yeah, so because there are so many different breath techniques out there, I think that's an important thing, that people learn how to apply, or when to apply, or how often to apply each different type of breath technique in different situations. So it sounds like the thing and just practicing prolonged exhalation, that's a good everyday thing to practice. But I'm imagining you wouldn't the hyperventilation sort of holotropic thing that you mentioned earlier, that's not something you would want to practice every day, or do you think you would? There is a benefit to using that kind of breathing technique to practice a few minutes every day?
No, not at all. Like, you wouldn't do ayahuasca every day, right? I mean, some people do. The nutbags, they do things like, heavy doses of psychedelics every day. You wouldn't do that. You wouldn't do mounds of cocaine every day unless you're an addict, right? And some people are addicted to that crazy buzz that you get from really fast breathing, but it doesn't mean it's good for you. So, you've got to treat this stuff like a drug, okay? Like, when you're breathing, you're actually changing your physiology, and it needs to be taken with respect. So you don't want to overdo anything in life. Okay? You want to have a balance. So the hyperventilating styles of breathing, like holotropic, rebirthing, they really should be saved for what they're intended for, which is this big cathartic releases, or this like psychedelic kind of therapeutic effects that you get, where you can have visions and see your past lives and angels and all that stuff, which I've not seen the angels yet, but I've heard people say that. But that's really should also be done in the context where you have a sitter, somebody sitting with you who's holding space and all that. It should be done in a safe environment, because doing something like that on your own, can be dangerous. It can lead to trauma and weirdness. Also, doing it with the wrong person can also lead to trauma. So you have to be very careful with this stuff, who you do it with. Whereas my breathing techniques that I use from pranayama are actually things you can have as a daily dose of bliss or wellness, and we follow this intermittent hypoxic training protocol and have created like a 21-day protocol which takes you through various stages, progressing towards more longer, deeper breath retention times with music, and the music powers the whole thing. So you get over 21 days a whole awakening. We call it the Soma awakening experience, where you basically learn how to breathe normally. Then you get taught the actual breathing technique of the Himalayan yogis. That was the most revered technique of all, Kumbhaka, which is leads to the benefits of intermittent hypoxia, which I'll definitely talk about. And over 21 days, the last week, you start to produce the DMT, okay? And you start to produce we don't produce DMT as such. We make an endogenous version of it called metatonin, which is similar as an analog to DMT. We also produce serotonin, melatonin. So what happens is you can have these very epic visionary states. However, because we're using breath retention in a special way, where you're holding your breath in certain ways and lowering the oxygen for brief periods of time, it has this magical effect of awakening parts of the body, strengthening, healing the cells, and optimizing the cardiovascular system and the nervous system. So yeah, I believe I've created a very powerful protocol for getting all the benefits of breathing techniques, as well as getting into these visionary states. However, we don't recommend you do these long sessions that you did last week every single day. We have a daily dose. So again, I'm very prescription, I'm still a pharmacist, and we have a daily dose of, we recommend you can carry on doing every day. And it's like a high intensity training for your soul and spirit. That's what we call it.
Yeah. And that's what I love about this. It's as you said, just that concept of using your breathing like a drug, and because it is a drug, because it can do different things to your physiology, um, and that is really, really powerful. I mean, that's probably the biggest thing out of today, that if people need to just remember something, how important your breathing is, because it is a drug and it can do what you need it to do potentially, and you need to respect that. But I
Yes.
love it that you did bring that up, because with all the different kind of breathing techniques out there that I do see, people try to emulate Vim to do what he's able to do, and I guess some people may overdo it, they may over practice, and I've always wondered, do
Yes.
they end up fainting, or there is that risk that you get hypoxic, and there's a danger to that too. And I also wondered, maybe there certain people that you would also be more cautious with, like you have respiratory problems, your asthmatics, your COPD patient, your people
Yeah.
who've got a cold or a flu. Should they? It's like, when you're already taxed and you're struggling to breathe a little bit, should you try avoid doing those techniques, rather go more towards the ums and the prolonged exhalation? Is that like the prescription you would give in that situation?
Well, we do have some caveats. On the whole, most people are okay doing these techniques. Even fainting is not a problem, to be honest, because you can't actually uh, like kill yourself by holding your breath. Your body will kick into gear very quickly to stop you from causing any damage, way before any damage is caused. So you can't really maintain a hypoxic level for long enough that's going to cause problems. It's just not possible. Uh, however, you have to do it with, obviously, with care, and you shouldn't do it like in a swimming pool, for example. You shouldn't do breath retention techniques where you're holding your breath like in the pool, which a few people have died doing, like like Wim Hof stuff, because they're trying to beat his ice bath record, which is just silly. You shouldn't do these things without somebody being around, at least. But then there's other people who do this underwater swimming, hypoxic training underwater, like Laird Hamilton. I think he's really into this, where you swim like laps underwater. Again, this really must be done in the right person, sitting and watching you, making sure you're not going to drown, because that's the only time there is a risk. It's when you're doing it in a not safe space. I know I've seen people do these breathing techniques on a high chair, on a high stool, okay, and then pass out and fall off and hit their head. I've seen that happen on camp, because when we were doing our early breathing sessions through Zoom, certain people I saw were on these stools, and I didn't notice they were on a stool until they fell off it and hit their head. So things like that, common sense stuff, like do it in safe space. But actually, yeah, you can't actually cause any physical damage just by holding your breath. You'd have to be physically suffocated, by someone, asphyxiated. Some people are into those kinky games. You've heard some of those celebrities have actually suffocated to death because they're trying to enhance the orgasmic state, because that's one of the things that can also enhance greatly when you lower the oxygen. You can even last longer. And then, they've passed out because they're trying to asphyxiate themselves. So you've got to be really, really careful. You've got to treat caution. But the people who are the most going to be at risk from this kind of stuff is people who have very, very high blood pressure, because certain breathing techniques, the way I do it with Soma is much more gentle. And so high blood pressure doesn't seem to be such a problem. But things like holotropic, rebirthing, those styles, where you're generating a lot of energy, a lot of electricity in the body, you've got to be careful if you've got high blood pressure. Also, epilepsy may be triggered. Okay, but epilepsy may even be fixed by it. I don't know. It's like, that's another one, which is a caveat. We try and do with caution. Then there's obviously COPD. Okay, so COPD has different stages. Like, there's very serious COPD where you can hardly breathe and you need machines. I don't recommend they do it. Any terminally ill patient, they're just not going to be able to do it probably anyway. They're not going to be able to get into that state. So obviously they've got to be careful. But on the whole, most people, and we have a whole list of it on our website, on the whole, most people can enjoy the benefits of this, and especially asthmatics. Asthma, believe it or not, is a symptom that is produced in the body to actually suppress the oxygen flow into your body, to protect you against oxygen. So people who are asthmatic are actually very sensitive to oxygen. And they basically produce the asthma to protect them from overbreathing and the harmful effects of too much oxygen. And asthmatics may also have certain triggers that is causing the inflammation, but on the whole, it's a symptom of overbreathing or stress, like anxious people who breathe too much from the mouth. At night, they may breathe in too much from the mouth, and that causes this asthma. Now, actually, this is a funny thing. Asthmatics, okay, who don't use medication, quite often outlive the asthmatics who take medication, who take the inhalers, because they're suppressing the body's natural mechanism to prevent too much oxygen going in the body. So those asthmatics who just don't worry about it and just get on with it, they tend to live longer. It's really weird. You can check out the studies on this. But here's the thing. Our soma techniques of breath retention, rhythmic breathing, breath retention, extended exhales is incredible for asthmatics. We have amazing results for people with asthma, fixing their asthma.
Yeah, and again, that would be so powerful for someone who, because I know when you're around an asthma patient and they have to have their medication with them for those emergency situations too, but it's the panic, that fear of I'm not going to be able to breathe and this could kill me. But I can imagine how empowering it may be for those patients in a safe environment that they go through this training with others around them and they feel that they're in control of their breathing again, just even psychologically, other than just the physiological benefits that would come from that. That would be very fulfilling to someone. So, but Niraj, I mean, we could geek out on so much more stuff here. I mean, you are just a treasure trove when it comes to breathing. And I'm loving this concept again of this foundational thing. I always look at foundational things that someone could do even as a teenager, or if they're in their 80s listening to this show. It's something that just, it's for life in a way. It's just a fundamental thing. It's accessible anywhere in this world. You don't need fancy equipment. You could literally just be here right now. And again, we did some training on this episode, which I loved it too. That was so practical for listeners. Yes. For anyone who wants to keep in contact with you, wants to find out more about you, are there any particular social media or places that you would recommend people to go to?
Yeah. So the renegadepharmacist.com website is like full of great information on, it's like all of my healthy prescriptions on there, my natural prescriptions for alternatives to medicines and drugs. That's a very cool place for getting that information. Then somabreath.com is our breathwork and pranayama training. We have a webinar that shows you awesome things like how you can tap into your autonomic nervous system, turn stress on and off, modulate it, and also get into psychedelic states, produce DMT, get into those optimum kind of high vibe states, but also use our protocol, which basically strengthens your body, improves your cardiovascular system, and even wakes up dormant parts of the brain and your physiology, and is having incredible results. People who go through our 21-day protocol, you just got to check out the feedback that we get from inside the community. We have a Facebook community. It's just amazing results. We've had people reporting coming off all their medications for depression, for blood pressures, people like manifesting. You see, like breathing techniques is magic as well. If you look at all the high ritual magic techniques from ancient shamanic tribes and even like modern day, more like Masonic kind of background, they had breathing techniques. Pranayama was a core part of their rituals. And when you breathe and use intention with it, you can use that as a way to get more energy to get things done, to send energy towards areas in the body you want to heal. You can use it to even call people in, attract people. Really weird. This is on the realms of the more woo-woo end of the spectrum, but I've had incredible results with combining intention with breath. And that's actually what Soma is really about, is a whole system designed to really help you move towards where you want to be in your life, right? Get your goals, at the same time have a therapeutic effect of enhancing your physiology, but using magic and intention to get what you want in life, to find out what it is you want in life. Because basically breathwork, like holotropic rebirthing, one of the purposes of it is it wakes you up to who you are. It's like this awakening to who you are. We've done it in a more gentle way, and we have a whole community and really well-trained instructors who guide you through this process. Because when you figure out who you are, okay, it can be quite challenging. It can be like, whoa, it can be a huge paradigm shift, because you're like a totally different person with a new head on. And so then you need to be coached through that, and you need to be guided through that, and safely, so that you really get the best out of life. So Soma is really my real heart and soul. It also ties in with the legend of Soma. And Soma is the psychedelic plant ritual that the rishis took thousands and thousands of years ago, when we were all living like in the Garden of Eden, and they used to live for long periods of time. And they use this ritual as a way to connect with the gods, with the divines. A lot like shamanic plant medicine journeys that people go on now. However, they did it in a very spiritual context called Soma. However, as the rishis start to move out and spread out around the world, which is all spoken about in the Rig Veda, the world's most ancient religious manuscript, the Soma starts to run out. So people are freaking out, the rishis are freaking out, and the gods order them to go inward to discover how to create the Soma within. And the Soma within is this DMT, serotonin, all the bliss molecules that we produce. And so that they were no longer dependent on all of the plants. So basically what they created was pranayama, tantra, pranayama, yoga. All of these things came from humans' quest to getting as high as humanly possible. So basically what I've done is I've taken these ancient tradition, shamanic techniques from Siberia, from India, from these ancient schools, and made it into a system called Soma. It's like the new way of doing yoga and all of these things, because yoga's even gone out of context a bit in the modern world. And I've consolidated all into a very powerful system, which I highly recommend.
Fantastic. And I'll link to all of that in the show notes for listeners.
Awesome.
Because again, I can imagine that's going to be very powerful for some people in their health journey right now too. Outside of just looking at nutrition and movement, breathing is another realm you need to control. So again, Niraj, thank you so much for sharing your information. I've really enjoyed our interview today.
Brilliant. Thank you, mate. Peace.